What is this man doing? Greetings from sunny Phoenix, Arizona. I am out here on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, this random parking garage. We got a plane flying overhead. Hopefully you guys can't hear too much of that. Thought I'd talk to you guys today about a topic that I have not covered on this channel before, and quite honestly, I've been nervous to cover. Today we are talking about money. Yes, personal finance. Money is a topic that has always intimidated me. I always seen it as too complicated for my understanding, and so I kind of gave up trying to understand it early on. But as I've gotten older, and I guess, you know, as a kid, like who cares, right? Like who cares about money? Maybe it's just a natural part of growing up that you start to care more about your finances. This past year, I've really been doing a deep dive into this topic of finance and just learning about how different markets work, the stock market, the real estate market. I've been learning about crypto. I've been learning about just global economics, you know, how all of the markets are sort of intertwined and how they work together. I've really become kind of a macroeconomics nerd. That by no means means that I am some sort of expert or you know, one of these millennial money gurus that you see online. I am just getting into this. I've just started this sort of journey of financial education. And it really all started with one book. And that book is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A lot of you guys might know this book already. It is the #1 selling personal finance book of all time. It's one of the most influential books of all time when it comes to this topic of finance. It really started me off on this journey of learning about this topic. Not only just reading the book, but I've watched hours of lectures from Robert Kiyosaki. I've listened to his radio show, and through learning from him, for the first time in my life, I actually feel like I am knowledgeable enough to be able to hold a competent conversation when it comes to money, right? Like I can actually sort of talk about the stock market and things of that nature without sounding like a complete idiot. And that's really what Rich Dad, Poor Dad is. It's sort of an entry into this topic. It's like a rundown of all things money, whether you're talking about personal finance, whether you're talking about the history of central banks and the Federal Reserve, whether you're talking about how real estate works. It's not in depth on one topic. It's just a sort of macroeconomics book giving you the 101 on everything, basically. It's a great starting point for people who are just getting into learning about finance. And so today I want to talk to you about some of the key takeaways that I've gotten from the book. These are complete game changers for me. I mean, this book is pretty old. It came out in the 90s, but it still continues to revolutionize the way people think about finance. So yeah, I just want to talk about some key principles, some key takeaways from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. All right, let's get into it.
My job is to make complex financial systems simple enough so the average person can understand it.
The first principle is the rich don't work for money. This is the first lesson that Robert Kiyosaki teaches in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it really establishes the framework for the rest of the book. It's a mindset shift that one must make in order to really begin to understand the financial system and how to truly build wealth. He talks about how there is a fundamental difference between how everyday people think about money and how the rich think about money. A lot of what is behind this mindset is understanding taxes. We often hear this idea nowadays that the rich don't pay enough in taxes. They don't pay their fair share, as it's often put. And for the most part, it's actually true. The rich pay substantially less in taxes as a portion of their income than the poor and the middle class do. However, most people don't really understand why that is. The reason they are able to legally pay less in taxes is because the rich don't work for paychecks. They work for assets.
Assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money from your pocket. They count anything of value as an asset. They count your car as an asset, your house as an asset, when it's really taking money from your pocket.
The reason they do that is because as an investor and an entrepreneur, you have more control over your income and how much you pay in taxes. Anyone who has a job knows that a huge portion of your paycheck goes towards taxes. One of the biggest taxes that workers pay is Social Security, which, quite frankly, is a Ponzi scheme in my opinion.
Social Security is running out of money.
Most of us are never going to see that money again. It's essentially the equivalent of setting your money on fire, like in Batman.
What happens to that money?
Well, hopefully it's held in trust.
Actually, they spent it.
So what's there going to be for me?
You get nothing. Good day, sir.
That's why the rich work to acquire assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, owning a business. These are the true vehicles to building wealth in the eyes of the rich, than the paycheck, because unlike the paycheck, assets aren't taxed, at least not in the same way as paychecks. So they can make money as the value of those assets increases, and once more, they actually get to keep that money as opposed to giving a large chunk of it to the government. The second principle is savers are losers. Okay, so in order to understand this point, we have to have a good understanding of inflation. The basic definition of inflation is when you have more money chasing fewer goods and services. In other words, it's when there's too much money in circulation and not enough stuff to buy with that money. As inflation rises, the value of the dollar goes down. So let's say you just put your money in a basic savings account and left it there for years, right? You didn't do anything with it. Well, in a few years' time, that money, those dollars that you have in that bank account are going to be worth a lot less depending on the rate of inflation. So in other words, you're actually losing purchasing power by saving your money in the long run. So while saving is good to an extent, because you always want to have cash on hand, right? That's just how we transact. We use cash in our society. In the long run, it's actually hurting you, right? Like I said, it's greatly diminishing your purchasing power over time. And it ties back into our first point. That's why Kiyosaki talks about how the rich don't work for money, they work more so for assets, because assets provide us with other stores of value that we can place our wealth in. It allows us to essentially put our money to work for us instead of the other way around. And unfortunately, this inflation problem is going to be here to stay with us in the long term because of something that happened in 1971.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
You see, prior to 1971, the dollar was on the gold standard, which meant that the value of the dollar was dependent on how much it was worth in gold. However, in 1971, Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, turning the dollar into a fiat currency.
Really what that did from an economic standpoint is it completely gave the government and the Fed free will to print as much money as they want to print. There was nothing that would constrain them, which was why a gold standard was set up in the first place.
They can essentially print as much money as they want and inject it directly into the economy as they see fit. The more they do this, the more inflation we get. Hence why savers are losers. The third principle is money is debt.
Everybody thinks getting in debt is bad. Well, who told you that?
Most of us were taught to think of debt as bad. We were brought up in the sort of Dave Ramsey school of thought that you should live debt-free, cut up your credit cards, and never ever accumulate any debt under any circumstances.
Now, this is a bit of a tricky one because for most of us, yes, debt is a very bad thing. It can ruin your life. You should definitely pay off your debt and live debt-free. But what he talks about in the book is that wealthy people have a much more nuanced view of what debt is. He goes into detail talking about taxes, right? How rich people use debt to avoid paying taxes legally. He talks about inflation and how that factors into the equation, right? So if you take out debt at an interest rate that is lower than the rate of inflation, to buy an asset, to buy something that's going to make you money over time, right? You could have a situation in which you're paying back your debt with devalued dollars, right? So in that situation, it would almost be like free money. So he goes into all these things, and it's tricky because you really have to know what you're doing if you're going to use debt. But if you get financially educated, if you really understand how to do it, you could actually use debt to build massive amounts of wealth, as a lot of people have. But it all hinges on your level of financial education. And so that's what he stresses in the book.
Most people are brainwashed when it comes to money. Go to school, get a job, work hard, pay your taxes, save money, get out of debt, buy a house, and invest in the stock market. Everybody who follows that program has been brainwashed.
So this isn't financial advice, right? I'm not trying to tell you what to do. But what I am saying is that we as ordinary people, we need to get educated on this stuff, okay? We need to learn this stuff. We need to learn how our economic system works. We need to learn about the Fed. We need to learn about how the dollar is valued. We need to learn about things like debt and leverage, credit, asset acquisition. This is stuff that the 1%, the wealthy, this is what they think about, okay? And this is why they're winning when it comes to this game of money. And so that's my only goal with this video, is to hopefully spur your interest to some degree in looking into these topics, maybe educating yourself on how all of this stuff works, because that's what this book has done for me. It has completely opened my eyes to thinking about money in an entirely different way, and that's what I want to do for you guys.
Guys, if there is one thing that I want you to take away from this video, it's that in the eyes of these central planners, of these bureaucrats, these politicians, these central bankers, it is not about you, okay? Like, I know that sounds pessimistic, but it's true. I mean, you know, can we really deny that from what we've seen happen these past couple years? When these central bankers and these bureaucrats and whatnot are behind closed doors and they are making decisions, they are not making decisions based on what's going to be good for you and your well-being and your family's well-being. They are not worried about you as a consumer. So that means that it is up to us to take our finances into our own hands. It is up to us to make sure that we are self-sufficient financially. And the optimistic part of that is that there has never been a better time to do just that. There is so much opportunity out there still. You know, I know we've gone through a hard couple years, but there is so much opportunity out there to build wealth, to become financially independent, and to not only survive in this crazy economic climate that we find ourselves in, but to actually thrive and to succeed in this environment. But you have to learn how the systems work. In other words, you have to learn how to play the game. And if you do, you become formidable. You become a dangerous player. Because don't get me wrong, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. You just got to make sure that you're on the right side of that equation.
You see here, kid, you got to just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just got to bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?